The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Post-convention polling continues to be very good to Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton and not quite so good to Republican nominee Donald Trump. I told you earlier this week that 7 of the 8 post-convention polls had Hillary Clinton leading Donald Trump. We now have, on top of that, a new poll from Fox News, of all places, that has Hillary Clinton 10 points ahead of Donald Trump, 49-39. The big question with any individual poll is, what was the methodology? And here are some of the highlights of these, the methodology of the Fox News poll done yesterday. It was a random sample of just over 1,000 registered voters. The sampling error is considered to be plus or minus 3 percentage points. This was a combination of landline and cell phone telephone numbers, which were randomly selected for inclusion using a probability proportionate to size method, which means that phone numbers for each state are proportional to the number of voters in each state. And these are results throughout the poll of registered voters unless otherwise noted. So let's now look at the big picture of recent polls with this Fox News poll included. You will recognize some of these other polls from earlier in the week, and you will see at the top of the list the Fox News poll, which has Hillary Clinton 10 points ahead. Of these 7 polls, once again, in this particular sampling, 6 have Hillary Clinton ahead. Earlier this week, she led by an average of, I believe it was 4.4 percentage points. That has now climbed slightly to an average lead of 5.1. Hillary Clinton's lead also growing in the 4-way race, which includes Libertarian Gary Johnson and Green Party candidate Jill Stein. We won't show you that. What really matters is the state by state. So we have an electoral college sort of quick glance to show you. Electoral-vote.com, which is a website that has been around for a very long time, divides the states into strongly likely and barely Democratic, strongly likely and barely Republican, and then ties. And if you're looking on the map, you will notice that the 2 states that are currently ties, according to electoral-vote.com, are Florida and Ohio. And those 2 states, as you will see, would still not get Donald Trump a victory. So right now, the estimate is based on current state-by-state polling. Hillary Clinton has 273 electoral votes, Donald Trump 218, and 47, the 18 in Ohio and the 29 in Florida, in the tie category. Now, under this scenario, I want to restate this. Hillary Clinton doesn't need Florida nor Ohio. Even if Donald Trump won both, Hillary Clinton would still win. And a few other notes about this map. New Hampshire, which in this particular map is slightly Republican. We have a new poll from New Hampshire, which has Hillary Clinton way up. We also have polling from a few other states, which is looking quite favorable to Hillary Clinton. Now, I tell you this because it's interesting, and it is August now, and we consider that polls now actually start to mean something. This is not, Lewis, to suggest Trump can't win, Hillary's got it in the bag, stay home, don't vote, forget about it. This is merely to tell you where things are right now.
And this change seems to be reflective of the recent mishaps of Trump and his campaign. And if he continues to make a fool of himself and make himself look bad, Hillary may have a decisive victory here.
Well, that is what some people are starting to. It's interesting. I was watching CNN today, and you have some Democratic strategists, and you can tell that they are saying things like, this race is going to tighten going into September, blah, 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 blah. And I don't even really feel like they mean it. I feel like they know they have to say this because bad things happen when you tell voters that it's already done, especially when you tell them your candidate has got it in the bag. We don't need your vote. Go play golf or play laser tag or go do whatever it is you want to do on election day instead of actually going to vote. I think that there probably are some Democratic strategists, and next I'll tell you about Republicans too, who are starting to be increasingly thinking that this is not going to be a very tight race, but that is not something that should encourage anybody not to vote. That, to me, that's the key takeaway here.
Yeah, let's still get everyone out there, especially not just for the presidential candidates. I mean, down ballot. Come on, that's huge.
It's bad right now on the Republican side with Donald Trump. To sum it up, there's a headline from the Washington Post yesterday, which really encompasses what's going on. And their headline was, Republicans nominate dangerously insane person to lead America, then panic when he proves that he's dangerously insane. And that is exactly what is going on. ABC News made big news yesterday reporting that there are senior Republican officials that are so confused, so frustrated, so dismayed by Donald Trump's behavior, self-inflicted wounds, picking battles he can't possibly win against other Republicans, against the Gold Star family who had a son killed in military action. These are not fights you can win, and these are optional fights that Donald Trump is picking, that these Republican officials are reportedly exploring how to replace Donald Trump if they can maybe get him to drop out, or if he does drop out. Let's start with RNC Chair Reince Priebus, who is not exactly the most rational individual, as we have seen over the last 6 to 12 months. Reince Priebus is described as being both stressed and very frustrated because he is, quote, running out of excuses to offer to party bigwigs about what the hell Donald Trump is doing and the rampant incompetence. Here's a quote from Newt Gingrich to the Washington Post that is extremely revealing. Quote, the current race is which of these two is the more unacceptable, because right now neither of them is acceptable. Trump is helping her, Hillary, to win by proving he is more unacceptable than she is. So how would this happen if Donald Trump were to, because he realizes that he has bungled it or because somebody convinces him to, how would Trump drop out and how would he be replaced? Well, number one, on paper, officially, Trump would have to voluntarily exit. There's no RNC rule that would allow the party to force Trump out. So whatever happens behind the scenes, Trump would have to at least publicly voluntarily exit. Number two, 168 members of the RNC would then choose Trump's successor, and it's a relatively complicated process. One Republican legal expert said Trump would have to drop out relatively early, like early September at the latest, to allow enough time to, number one, choose a replacement, but that get them on enough state ballots to even win. And as we know, Lewis, they would not even be able to get on all state ballots. Right. That has come and gone a while ago. The question now is, can they even get him on enough state ballots to conceivably, him or her, I guess it's possible that Trump could be replaced with a woman if this happened, to conceivably get to 270 electoral votes. And then something called Rule 9 from the RNC rules would apply. Who cares, right? I mean, the point isn't that this is likely, that it's not likely. I'll be clear about that. The point is, if there's a discussion happening in the Republican Party about what would the process be for replacing our candidate in September, you've lost already, right? I mean, that not literally lost the election, but you are in a position of weakness to begin with.
Yeah, this is a discussion for 5 months ago, or maybe 4 months ago, whatever. It just doesn't make any sense right now. Just speaking about it is extremely desperate.
There's an important point here, which is that we've seen for a while Republicans who said they aren't sure or they won't be voting for Donald Trump, right? But now we have a growing list of Republicans who are straight up saying, I will be voting for Hillary Clinton. I told you yesterday about one Republican voting for Hillary Clinton, Congressman Richard Hanna. Now we also know about former Republican gubernatorial candidate who has a $2 billion net worth, I will mention, Meg Whitman, who will be voting for Hillary Clinton. And former Chris Christie advisor Maria Kamala announced that she would be supporting Hillary Clinton in November. The people panicking aren't the ones who voted to nominate Donald Trump. Those voters, Lewis, still seem to be very happy with this coalescing of all sorts of retrograde and pond scum bottom feeding elements of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
They're still happy with Trump. It's the insiders who are saying, what have we done here?
No doubt. And the Trump supporters are looking at those insiders and thinking, well, there's a traitor. That's clearly just a corporatist, a Hillary shill. She was an outsider. She did this, that, the other thing. That's how they think about it.
I sort of imagine when I hear about these meetings that are going on with these panicked Republican insiders, I imagine the scene being, it's a dark room. The blinds are drawn, about 75% closed. If you talk about turning the slats of the blinds, if you sort of imagine, you have some reflections from the sunlight sort of on the ceiling, right? Am I sort of setting it? There's leather couches. The couches stink like cigars. Actually, everybody in the room is probably smoking cigars. Simon and Garfunkel's The Sound of Silence is playing, and they are, as that lyric, "Hello, darkness, my old friend," plays, wondering, how are we going to get out of this? Very, very depressed. This is the picture I've sort of drawn up in my mind, you know?
Very descriptive and poetic. Yeah, it's like that. I picture something more like the Legion of Doom.
Okay.
And they're worried about this monster they've created.
Well, I wanted to say that this is a monster they have created. And when I say they, as I mentioned, it's not necessarily the Republican insiders who have created it. A lot of them knew this was a mistake to begin with, but
it's their rhetoric for the past X number of decades.
That's right. The rhetoric that they've allowed to be legitimate debate within their party has led to the most extreme of extremists coalescing around Donald Trump. But hey, he's going to build that wall and ban Muslims. So, that'll be tremendous. And that's still something they've got going for them, to the extent you think any of that will ever happen, which it obviously won't. Send me your thoughts about this implosion. It does seem as though the Republican Party is eating itself from the inside out. I'm on Twitter at @dpacman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is William Nealand. William, I really can't thank you enough for being a David Pakman Show member. The program started on a whim years ago when I was in college and said, what the hell, I'll show up with some notes and try to talk about politics. And it probably would not have gone beyond that were it not for the support that we received from our viewers, both in terms of promoting and watching and listening to the show, but also through the membership program. And I encourage you to do the right thing. Do what William did. Sign up at davidpakman.com/membership and keep independent media strong and growing. And of course, if you ever shop on Amazon.com, the shopping you do can also support the work we do. Just remember to stop at davidpakman.com/Amazon before you do your shopping. I have a fantastic documentary recommendation for you today. The documentary is called Rich Hill. It is available on Netflix. It is also available on Amazon. And the way I sum it up, Lewis, and I know you've seen this, it's basically a story of poverty in the American Midwest. And it follows 3 youngsters in poor parts of Missouri, in a very rural, poor part of Missouri. And I don't want to give it away, but this is one of the most depressing documentaries I've seen in recent years.
It's an eye opener. Yeah, it's an important documentary. I watched it. I really enjoyed it. I say I enjoyed it. I mean, it was
informative and well done. Yeah,
informative and well done. Yes, so I highly recommend this one.
Some of the people that you see, I mean, I don't know. I had really mixed feelings about it because on the one hand, I recognized that so much of the story is about poverty. At the same time, it seemed to me, and this is not in any way to be insulting, Lewis, and I don't know if you had the same reaction, that sometimes I couldn't tell whether the affliction that was being experienced by some of the people in the film was poverty or some kind of mental handicap. And again, I'm not sure what is environmental. I just had very, very mixed feelings about, is this just poverty that is being profiled, or is it also other things, mental illness, etc.?
It's certainly other things. That if you watch this, you'll see that there's trauma involved.
Yeah.
There's how you are raised. Any number of factors can turn you into. I don't want to use a bad term here, but it turn you into one of the people you might see in the film. And
yeah.
like you said, it's not an insult in any way. It's just it's just kind of shocking.
Really depressing and eye-opening, especially if you live in one of the parts of the country like where I've lived basically my entire life, the Northeast, Boston, New York City, and West Coast, more I would say suburban or urban areas rather than some of these really poor, isolated, rural areas. Again, the documentary is Rich Hill. It's available on Netflix, on Amazon, and you can check out all of my recommendations at davidpakman.com/recommendations. Yesterday, I told you about MSNBC's Joe Scarborough revealing that he was told during a 1-hour briefing, Donald Trump 3 times asked, why can't we just use nukes on various different countries? I want to tell you how dangerous this guy is. Later yesterday, Donald Trump started describing a video he had seen, a video he had watched earlier in the day, that he believed to be of Iranian officials unloading cash from an airplane. The money reportedly part of a deal, of a payment announced earlier this year to supposedly settle a decades-old dispute about a weapons sale that didn't happen. So I'm going to play it for you. The initial reaction was, Trump has started getting those security briefings, the classified security briefings, because he's the official Republican nominee. Trump seems to be describing things that are probably classified, because the initial reaction was, we don't see any public record of what Trump is describing. So here's the video of Trump seemingly describing classified stuff he was told.
Iran provided all of that footage, the tape of taking that money off that airplane, right? $400 million in cash. How does the president do that? How do you do that? We're going to send $400 million in cash. This is in cash, in currency. Now, here's the amazing thing.
Please.
Over there, where that plane landed, top secret, they don't have a lot of paparazzi. The paparazzi doesn't do so well over there, right? And they have a perfect tape done by, obviously, a government camera. And the tape is of the people taking the money off the plane, right? That means that in order to embarrass us further, Iran sent us the tapes, right? It's a military tape. It's a tape that was a perfect angle, nice and steady, nobody getting nervous because they're going to be shot because they're shooting a picture of money pouring off a plane.
So the initial reaction is, holy sit. I said sit, Lewis. We don't know what Trump is talking about. It sounds like he's describing classified stuff from a briefing. This guy is a completely dangerous individual to the United States' national security. There's no publicly available video that matches what Trump is talking about. It sounds like this could be top secret. What is going on? The Trump campaign was asked about it. A spokeswoman declined to say what it was Trump was referring to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then another possibility surfaced, which is, hold on a second. Does Trump even remotely approximate accuracy in terms of what he's discussing here? Because a video was found. It turns out that there was a video clip shown on Fox News yesterday morning, which appeared to show U.S. citizens arriving in Geneva, Switzerland on January 17th. And the video was marked Geneva, Switzerland. And now it raises the possibility that this wasn't a classified video. It might have been a video of something else altogether that Trump believes is an Iran video that he has seen, which now he appears to have said about 6 or 8 different inaccurate things about. So I don't know, Lewis, whether to be more concerned that at one point it seemed as though Trump was revealing the details of a classified video, or that Trump may have misunderstood a video of people arriving in Switzerland as some kind of military shot video of what was going on in terms of cash payments involving Iran. I don't know which is scarier.
Well, Dave, we're both fans of government transparency, right?
Yeah.
Maybe Trump is the guy. Maybe this is the guy we want in office. If we want full government transparency.
He doesn't even have the common sense to not describe in detail classified top secret stuff he's seen. So we will have full transparency under a Trump presidency.
No, I'm sure there will be no transparency once he's in the White House. I'm not really sure what to make of this. It's a bit strange, and it wouldn't surprise me if he just got confused with something he saw.
Switzerland can look a lot like Iran. I've been to Switzerland. Switzerland and Iran both have $32 cheeseburgers, I've read on the internet.
Maybe the airports look similar. That's possible, right?
This is funny. Trump appears to be in a competition with himself to say the most ridiculous possible things. And he has come up with just a brilliant suggestion for how to fight ISIS. He suggests an alliance between Russia and the United States. The problem is, although I wouldn't call it an alliance, an agreement, an understanding between Russia and the United States to fight ISIS has existed for almost a year. Take a look at this. I think you're going to like this.
Example, he talks about Ukraine. I believe I know far more about foreign policy than he knows.
Yeah.
Look at Ukraine. He talks about Ukraine. Well, you know how tough he is, right? How tough he is with Russia. In the meantime, they took over Crimea. And I understood that. And most papers covered what I said accurately. Some didn't because the press is so dishonest. But Crimea, I mean, the Russians took it over under Obama's very powerful leadership. And, you know, he talks about me with Russia. Wouldn't it be a wonderful thing, frankly, if we actually got along with Russia and worked out some kind of a deal where we go in and knock the hell out of ISIS along with NATO and along with countries that are in the area? Wouldn't that be wonderful as opposed to fighting?
Great idea, Don. Turns out the U.S., Russia, as well as NATO member countries, Canada, France, and the UK, as well as nearby nations, Saudi Arabia and Jordan and Turkey, have all been coordinating attacks against ISIS forces in Syria since nearly a year ago. So now let's talk about the whole alliance working together agreement. Yeah, there's probably some semantic disagreements. I've seen people on the internet focus on that. Well, there's no alliance with Russia. It's an agreement, or we're working together, or we're coordinating attacks. It's effectively what Donald Trump is suggesting. At this point, this guy is so clueless. It is only invisible to the most ignorant and low information voters. He clearly knows nothing about anything, and now coming up with this just amazing suggestion. Now, I wonder if you went to him and you said, Donald, love the idea. Love the idea. By the way, Obama set that up nearly a year ago. Do you applaud Obama for doing that? I'm guessing the answer would be no.
Probably not. You have to appear to be strong and appear as if you know what you're talking about. And he is actually very good at that. He's good at convincing people that he knows what he's talking about. But foreign policy has got to be his weakest, his weakest spot, right?
And you can tell that even from looking at his other so-called proposals. I mean, look at the ban Muslim immigrants thing. It started off as ban Muslim immigrants. Then it turned into ban Muslim immigrants from certain countries, while his spokespeople say religion is not a part of the plan at all, although he's talking about banning Muslim immigrants from certain countries. Then it went to, well, we can have Muslim immigrants, but we need to vet them first, which is exactly what we're already doing, right? Currently, any religious members of any religion can come to the United States, but we have a vetting process which is considered quite good and quite strict. So that's exactly what Obama is doing. Much like with his big suggestion on Russia, what he ultimately ended up in one version of his explanation, which of course changes every day in a totally schizophrenic manner.
You said Obama.
Trump, what the plan that Trump every day changes, but one version of that plan is exactly the plan that we currently have, for which he only criticizes Barack Obama.
Well, having many stances on one issue is actually a pretty good technique.
Yeah.
And if saying each one of those stances multiple times, you can always go back and point to something and say, oh, no, this is what I meant. This is what I said.
Well, look at the 45 seconds talking about the minimum wage, where he took 5 positions talking to Bill O'Reilly. There shouldn't be a federal minimum wage. Keep it the same. Increase it slightly, but allow states to pick whatever minimum wage they want. Great. I mean, he did mention all sorts of possibilities in those 45 seconds. I guess he has all bases covered. This man is dangerous, ladies and gentlemen. I know it was all funny at the beginning. Climate change is a hoax created by China, and mocking the disabled reporter, and talking about Megyn Kelly's, wherever she was bleeding from. It was all fun and games until the guy is one step away from the nuclear launch codes and confused about why we can't just start nuking countries in the Middle East.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by David Hone, who is a lecturer in zoology at Queen Mary University in London. He is an expert on dinosaur myths. You know, at the top of my list is always one. I don't know how prevalent this is on your side of the pond, as we say,
Sure.
but on our side, there is a contingent that believes Homo sapiens and dinosaurs coexisted in some kind of peaceful heaven almost on Earth at some point. Let's just start with that and see if we can dispel with that notion right away.
Well, yeah, so that's one of those great ones where it's both utterly false and completely true, which is always a great way to start one of these things. So it's false in the sense that, classic films like 1 Million Years BC and King Kong and stuff like that. So stuff like Stegosaurus and Tyrannosaurus running around with cavemen. No, absolutely not. End of story. Not to the tune of 60 odd million years.
Right.
However, you have to remember that all birds living around us today, swans, pigeons, ducks, everything, are dinosaurs. They're the direct descendants of dinosaurs. They're literally living dinosaurs. So at one level, when you ask the question, did dinosaurs live alongside man? Well, yes, I can see them out the window right now. Those are dinosaurs. So yeah, what the kind of classic, if you like, dinosaurs, what you go to museums to see what paleontologists dig up, those guys are long gone and never overlapped with humans. But we do have a group of animals alive today which are classified as dinosaurs that, of course, live with us.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Tyrannosaurus, right? Every five-year-old's favorite dinosaur, Tyrannosaurus, so many different myths and sort of caricatures around that. There's this perception that exists of Tyrannosaurus as a dedicated and bloodthirsty sort of a violent killing machine. Is that a fair representation of Tyrannosaurus?
Probably not, no. And to be honest, nor is the flip side, which you also often hear, which was something that kind of came up in the 80s and became popular for a while. The idea that it was just a scavenger and just, couldn't or almost never killed anything directly, but was just hoovering up dead bodies and stuff like this. One thing it's always worth remembering is that we've got to be very careful about how we characterize some of these animals. You get a lot of anthropomorphism when it comes to extinct animals. It's like, oh, they're bloodthirsty, they're relentless, they're passive, they're peaceful, all these different adjectives for different things. And the truth is we don't know. There are some really big but actually surprisingly gentle animals out there, giraffe, gorilla, things like this. There are small and extraordinarily aggressive animals out there like a lot of the badgers and members of that group. So you often get, the big herbivores were peaceful and the carnivores were aggressive. And that's a very poor way of looking at these things. So that's one thing I'd immediately like to shove out a lot of the language that gets used with dinosaurs. But in terms of Tyrannosaurus, it was absolutely an active hunter. In fact, we have direct fossil evidence of Tyrannosaurus carrying out attacks on other animals because we see healed injuries. We see actually Tyrannosaur teeth broken off in the bones of herbivores, and then the bones have healed over the tooth and covered it. So this was clearly an animal that bit another one, but that one, at least on this occasion, escaped and showed the injury as a result of that. But we also have direct evidence of Tyrannosaur scavenging, because we have dead bodies which, because of the way that they were buried and what we understand about the rocks and the geological formations, had already died and generally been washed down a river or something similar and got bashed up and broken, then buried. Then we see the bite marks from tyrannosaurs on them. So, of course, that's scavenging. This animal died long ago and it's already moved. And they're trying to scrape the last of the meat off. So
and some of what you're getting at, it sounds like, when you talk about sort of the activity of a particular animal, you're also sort of implicit in that making some assessment of intelligence, right? What do we know about dinosaur intelligence? And is there, like with many different animals, sort of a range depending on exactly what species we're discussing?
Yeah, so intelligence is one of those, unbelievable hard things to quantify. We struggle enough to quantify it in living species. It's very hard to work out just how smart dogs are, cats, dolphins, crows, parrots, all kinds of things that have been tested. Behaviorists have spent years on these with living animals and aren't sure quite how clever they are. So just having an idea of the size and shape of a brain of a dinosaur, which is all we've got to go on, is very, very little evidence to try and build up an idea of their intelligence. Generally, things with larger brains or proportionally larger brains are smarter than things with proportionally smaller brains. That's not a big surprise. And most dinosaurs, by that measure, did not have particularly big brains and therefore were not particularly smart. But there is also lots of animals today which don't have big brains. You would think are not that clever, and actually, when we put them to the test, things like sheep, there's lots of gags about how dumb sheep are. Actually, they have incredibly good memories for other sheep. They can recognize the faces of their friends or flock mates, even years after they've seen them before. They retain a memory and can absolutely identify them.
Wow.
That's, at one level, quite a smart thing to do. And the other thing is, birds, in particular, parrots and the crow family, are incredibly smart. And a lot of them don't have particularly big brains, either in absolute size or proportional size. But actually, they have a special modification. Birds as a whole have a special modification to their brain. And they basically pack in much more brain tissue for the size of their head than we, the mammals, do. So you don't necessarily need a giant brain to be really smart. And of course, birds are directly descended from dinosaurs. We don't know at what point this special brain feature kicked in. It's entirely plausible plenty of dinosaurs had something like this. On average, though, I wouldn't put them as particularly smart, but then actually not that many animals are.
When we think about the sort of environment or the climate in which dinosaurs are often portrayed in popular culture, the theme seems to be that it is always very warm, right? The dinosaur scavenging or hunting through the jungle, for example, etc.
Yeah, it's jungles and swamps are the two big ones.
I mean, is there anything to that?
Well, it was certainly a place that they liked. On average, remember the dinosaurs were around for 130 odd million years. That's a long period of time, and they were on every continent. We have dinosaur fossils in Antarctica, right the way into northern Canada, right the way into China, Japan, New Zealand, Brazil, you name it, we find them. So they lived worldwide for 130 million years. Therefore, inevitably, it's always a bad idea to go, dinosaurs did this, because there's going to be an exception to that somewhere. But yes, the general period that dinosaurs were around, it was much warmer than it was now on average, but that didn't mean there weren't cool places. And indeed, towards the end of the dinosaurs' reign, so to about 70 odd million years ago, actually places like northern Canada were much like northern Canada is now. It was very cold in winter. There was probably a lot of snow on the ground, and the dinosaurs were living there in this environment. So the idea that they were limited to warm environments or limited to rainforesty, jungly swamps, that kind of thing, absolutely not true. We get them in the snow. We get them in deserts. We get them, yes, certainly in forests and rainforests, but we get them on the plains and pretty much everywhere in between, out on the coast. If there was a plot of land, there were dinosaurs living on it.
What do we know, or what can we sort of deduce about the social structure of dinosaurs? And again, it's probably a question that depends on exactly what dinosaur we're talking about.
Yeah, so we know very, very little about this for the vast majority of the dinosaurs. I mean, most dinosaurs are known from only one good skeleton or a handful of good skeletons. So, you're really, really short on data like that. For behavior, one of the things we often have is footprints, and in particular, we'll see groups of animals moving together from footprints. The problem is, of course, is that it's actually very hard to put a footprint to an actual skeleton. You can do it in a very gross sense and say, okay, this was probably a horned dinosaur, this was a carnivorous dinosaur, but going, oh yeah, those footprints are Tyrannosaurus, those footprints are Triceratops. It basically can't be done. So even if you do have, oh wow, there's a huge herd and we think there are hundreds of animals there. What was it? A horned dinosaur narrows it down to about 70 species. It doesn't tell you anything really meaningful. So yes, did some dinosaurs live in herds? Absolutely, we've got some decent evidence for that. When people say, oh, Velociraptor hunted in packs, no, we absolutely have zero evidence for that. for example. What we do know is there was a dinosaur, it's a fairly close relative of Velociraptor, and twice now we found apparent groups of this animal together, this thing called Deinonychus. But just because you found a few of them together, even of the same species, does not mean they were living and hunting in groups. Maybe they came together because they were mating. Maybe they died in some kind of drought. Maybe it was just unusual. Maybe they were a rare example. I mean, most cats are solitary, but lions live in packs. They live in prides. So even if Deinonychus was living in a pack and was a pack hunter, which I doubt because the evidence is very equivocal, to then go and say, oh, so Velociraptor must have done as well, it's a really bad idea. People love extrapolating far further than they should. Interesting, the one dinosaur which we do have a good feel for is a little thing called Protoceratops. This is a small horned dinosaur, though actually it doesn't have horns, but it does have the big frill at the back of the head. From Mongolia and China from about 70 million years ago. And Protoceratops is great because we have 3 or 4 groups of adults preserved together as an entire group, all about the same size, all about the same age. We then have a pair of animals about 2/3 grown together. Then we have a group of 4 young animals, probably less than a year old, and then a group of about 10 which are probably only a few months out of the nest. So we have 5 or 6 incidents now of Protoceratops living together in a group, always about the same size, always about the same age, implies they're hanging around together, and of multiple different ages. And coupled then with some footprint data that we have for them, this is one of the rare occasions where we're pretty happy that the footprints fit the skeleton, because actually there's no other animals just like them around, so it's probably their footprints. That's a pretty good evidence that these animals spent a lot of time together in groups. But we also still find lots of skeletons out on their own. So maybe they did it for some part of their lives and not others. Maybe they did it in spring and not winter. This kind of stuff we still don't know. They're probably the best example of dinosaurs living together in a group. But even that, there's an enormous difference between sheep that live together in a group, but they're mostly just kind of there, if you like, and say wolves that live in a group and actively hunt together and have a social hierarchy and a dominant male and female, and there's breeding rights and stuff. So just being in a group is really not the same thing as necessarily a social structure, or again, actually going back to intelligence, how they interact and stuff. And that's still very, very hard to pull apart or begin to decipher.
David, in the very limited time I have left, Jurassic Park, I mean, the way dinosaurs are depicted in Jurassic Park, by and large, accurate, inaccurate?
If you go back to the original film in 93 or whatever it was, for the time, very good. Mostly they were taking a lot of information on board from modern research, and they were putting it into their animals. And as the series went on, and Jurassic World is perhaps the epitome of this, they just haven't updated. So Jurassic Park was pretty cutting edge for 1993. Jurassic World is 1993 dinosaurs shown in 2014, 2015. In other words, they're now the best part of 25 years out of date. We know a lot more about them. And therefore, things like Velociraptor, it should have feathers. We kind of suspected that in 1993, but we weren't that sure. Now we're 100% sure it should be properly feathered like a bird. That's a really big difference. Things like, actually, ironically, Stegosaurus is the one that people keep bringing up. Stegosaurus in the second film, Jurassic Park 2, it's a really good rendering of Stegosaurus. It looks great. It's just a bit big. The one in the new Jurassic World, they've got its tail dragging on the ground like you see the illustrations of dinosaurs from the 1940s. So they've actively gone back about 70 years in research between the second film and the fourth film. So that's really not up to date and is, actively bad. And just to fill in on this, at one level, I don't care because it's fiction. At the other level, I care a hell of a lot because people come to me and come to museums and talks and they go, yeah, but that film showed it and that film's right. And so because the public are very bad at understanding the difference between fact and fiction as far as I can tell.
You're telling me.
And at least the original Jurassic Park made a big deal of how up to date their dinosaurs were. I think that's become a big holdover. And therefore, I really am ambivalent about this, because at one level, it's fiction, it's a film. I went and watched Jurassic World. It was fun. At the other hand, I go out and do talks in schools and online and stuff like this, and I get asked questions about things they saw in the film, assuming they're true.
Right.
And that's kind of a worry, or at least with my educator hat on, very frustrating indeed that people think this is either accurate or even, actively trying to be particularly accurate and up-to-date science. And it's not. As I say, in some ways they're even going backwards.
All right, David Hone, lecturer in zoology at Queen Mary University of London. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me on.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I want to submit to the audience, Lewis, a nomination for the most comically clueless Trump staffer of the campaign so far, and that is none other than spokeswoman Katrina Pearson. You'll remember yesterday I told you how she went on CNN and spoke to Wolf Blitzer and said that the death of U.S. Army Captain Humayun Khan, the son of Khazar Khan, made very known by his DNC speech, was actually the fault of President Obama and Hillary Clinton. Of course, that death happened in 2004 when President Obama was 5 years away from becoming president of the United States. She has now decided to sort of walk it back, but again, it's one of these sort of bogus apology type statements. This is what she had to say.
Katrina, do you want to apologize to Mr. Khan?
Yeah.
Apologize for the timeline. What I was talking about is the fact that Donald Trump has no connection to anything having to do with Captain Khan, who was a brave war hero. The timeline is very simple and true.
You do acknowledge now that you were just wrong.
Well, absolutely. That's why I use probably, because I was just going through the timeline.
Right. She just said President Obama was probably responsible for a military death 5 years he took office, not definitely responsible for a 5-year a death that predates his presidency by 5 years. Got it. Thanks, Katrina. Appreciate it. She sure cleared it up for me.
Yep. I think that this really is just the best Trump can do. Why would she not have been fired ages ago?
Yeah,
right.
It doesn't make any sense.
It's just mess up after mess up after mess up. And I'm saying mess up because I can't say F up.
What it actually is, yeah. And I honestly don't know why she would reverse this at all. Everybody knows that the Illinois State Senate had a major role in planning and implementing George W. Bush's war in Iraq back in 2003 and 2004. Totally reasonable.
Yeah. Actually, did you know that Hillary Clinton was responsible for World War I? This is little known fact.
Yeah.
But you can look this up.
Why do you even need to blame Obama if the point you're trying to make is Trump had nothing to do with your son's death? It just doesn't follow. And a reminder, ignored in this entire conversation, is that the vice presidential running mate of Donald Trump, Mike Pence, voted for the war, but Trump has already covered that, saying, hey, everybody makes mistakes when it's your running mate. But that same mistake made by your opponent is completely different, Lewis, of course.
Of course, yeah. And Donald Trump has repeatedly said that he was so against the war, right? But that might not be true.
Yeah, well, we actually had Trump campaigns on the fact that he was never in favor of the Iraq war. Let's go to video from 2002. Donald Trump saying something very, very different, audio, that is, to Howard Stern.
Really don't know the enemy.
I know, they're skulking around somewhere and you just feel like you're a sitting duck.
But we have an idea who the enemy is, and a lot of times the politicians don't want to tell you that.
Are you for invading Iraq?
Yeah, I guess so. I wish it was. I wish the first time it was done correctly.
Right. Are you still against rebuilding the World Trade Center?
I'm not against rebuilding it.
Okay, so do not fall for the Trump was always against the Iraq war thing. I've presented audio to you where he says something very different. Now, here's the really important thing. The longer that these are the discussions on corporate media, the worse it is for Donald Trump. It can't be good to constantly be doing damage control, and that is exactly what we are seeing reflected in the polls.
Well, we have to give corporate media a little bit of credit here, because instead of actually covering important things most of the time, it is fun to cover Donald Trump F-ups and Katrina Pearson, spokesperson, F-ups a lot of the time. And it's seriously damaging, right?
No doubt. And the polls are reflecting that.
They do it to Hillary, too. It's just that Trump provides them with so many more opportunities to do so.
Yeah, it's a wealth of material, no doubt about it. Comcast and similar internet services in the U.S. are outrageously expensive. They're monopolistic. They're also not that good. They're not that reliable. The customer service is terrible. They're not that fast, et cetera, et cetera. Comcast this week told the FCC that it should be able to charge broadband users who want to protect their privacy more money. Think about that. The FCC has been trying to craft new privacy rules which would force internet service providers to disclose what they're collecting, what data of yours they are selling, and also allowing you to opt out. But the FCC also wants to prevent ISPs from charging extra for privacy, right? I mean, this is just completely insane. Comcast says, oh, we'll do it. We'll provide the privacy and give people the ability to opt out of sharing, et cetera. But that will be a premium option. Think about the audacity and the nerve of these companies to say, hey, okay, there's really no other options, right? There's one cable provider in each jurisdiction by and large. If you want to switch to something else, you've got to go with, like satellite, internet, or whatever else. And on top of that, we're going to charge you outrageous fees. The speed is going to be terrible. The customer service will be terrible. And if you want more privacy, you're going to have to pay something extra. This is incredible audacity.
I don't even understand why all of this is necessary. They can just up all of their prices anytime they want. Or do they have to petition the FCC whenever they add that $1 or $2 internet service fee or information fee, whatever bowl they make up?
Comcast said the following in a letter regarding the FCC filing, quote, "A bargained for exchange of information for service is perfectly acceptable and widely used model throughout the U.S. economy, including the internet ecosystem, and is consistent with decades of legal precedent and policy goals related to consumer protection and privacy." What they're basically saying is part of the reason the prices are as low as they are, which is insane because the prices are really high, the prices are held as low as they are because they are subsidized by the fact that we collect and then sell some of this data to third-party companies and for marketing, et cetera, and that is sort of part of the bargain that is established between consumer and company. If you want us to remove that, we need to make up for the money we're going to lose by not being able to sell your data by actually charging you more. Basically saying privacy should be a paid luxury option. The entire system is just disgusting and despicable. What else can we say? We've been covering this for years.
Yeah, and didn't we just learn that Comcast bought Yahoo too? I mean, these companies continue to just become these gigantic monopolies, and the FCC and the consumers seem to be completely helpless. And there's just it's ridiculous, Dave.
At what point can we say this is extortion? Or maybe we've already been able to say that colloquially for years.
Yeah, well, legally, I don't know. Colloquially, yeah, certainly seems like it.
A few people emailed me saying, well, you can run a VPN rather than pay for the privacy premium or whatever it will be. Yeah, I mean, a lot of users are not sophisticated enough to set up a VPN. I know people will email me. They say, David, you just have to Google how to set up a VPN. But let's sort of operate in the real world. Just because you can Google it and understand it doesn't mean everybody is going to be able to just Google how to set up a VPN and do it in their home. This is just absolutely ridiculous and nothing about it surprising at all. I mean, just nothing surprising whatsoever. I have a voicemail number. It's 219-2-DAVID-P. Call at any time. Love to hear from you. Here's a voicemail I received.
My name is Ernesto Hernando. I'm calling from El Paso, Texas. And I just have a question. Has anybody ever thought of giving Donald Trump an IQ test? It just seems he's got a third grade education. Thank you.
Listen, Trump went to Wharton at University of Pennsylvania. He talks about it many, many times. He's tremendous. He did just incredibly well, and it was all fantastic and tremendous. And I'm sure he would do great. He would do great with the IQ test, and he's going to do great with the blacks and the Hispanics and the Muslims, like he says. It would just be fantastic, I'm sure.
Like asking him to take a polygraph test. It's just not going to happen.
We should go back, though. I like that idea. Who mentioned it, Lewis? Whether candidates should have to take sort of a psych eval once they become. We were talking about that yesterday. I don't remember exactly the context. I like that idea.
That's a great idea. Of course, I would be thrilled, and it would have to be a very strict evaluation, and they'd have to not be accepted into office if they failed.
On today's bonus show, we will talk about professional joint rolling. We will talk about a private company planning to land on the moon. The Olympic, I don't know if I want to call it Olympic hilarity or Olympic sadness. It continues. There are many, many problems down in Brazil for the soon-to-begin Olympics. We will talk about all of those stories and more on the bonus show. And of course, there's only one way to get access to the bonus show, and it happens to be instantaneous access. And it's by signing up for membership at davidpakman.com/membership.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.